1, 0.
What a cracking intro. What a cracking intro. Pumped, pumped. So welcome everybody to another cracking edition of the Map Round Show. This is the Built in New York series, where I'm shining a light and having conversations that matter with founders in New York, building and changing the shape and look and feel of the world of business. With me on the line is Derek Laclair from Mpac. Welcome to the show.
Matt, thank you for having me.
No, it's great, man. Thank you for being here. So why don't you kick us off, Derek? You're doing some very interesting things. I've had the privilege of getting to really understand the story here. But for our viewers and audience around the world who potentially haven't heard about you or about your startup, give us the elevator pitch. What do we need to know?
Sure. Yeah. So in order to reach our 2050 climate goals, just in the United States, we have to decarbonize about 7,800 buildings every single day for the next 28 years. So that's a pretty staggering statistic. And the first step for any one of these retrofits is to do an assessment of what's already in place. And that's what Mpac is all about, is helping this site survey or data collection period with an AI enabled software that reduces the time spent on this really tedious process by up to 80%.
So we're going to get into that. So these climate goals that you touched on, Derek, what are they exactly? Are these like the UN climate goals? Like who's setting these goals?
So it really depends on the goal itself. I'm mostly talking about the United States, but because of the federalist system, every state has its own climate goals, and so. But I wanted to just focus on the U.S.
Okay, because 2050 seems a long way away, doesn't it?
It does, but in the grand scheme of things, it's. I mean, I think when you bring it back down to the individual level, every day that goes by that we're not retrofitting 7,800 buildings, it becomes a much more present problem.
Exactly. So let's talk about these buildings. So you said there's 7,500 odd buildings, right, that need to be become more energy compliant. So let's talk about these buildings. Like, how old are they? Where are they? And what is the impact of these the buildings and the equipment in these buildings on the achievement of these 2050 climate goals?
Sure. Yeah. So the I think with regard to the built environment, which is just a fancy way of saying buildings and other things that human beings have built, like utility substations and such. Generally speaking, you're talking about a really old building stock in the United States. It's about three-quarters of all buildings in the U.S. Are over 22 years old, meaning they were built in the last century. And another 66% of buildings have never been retrofitted, have never been touched in any way, shape, or form. So at the end of the day, you are dealing with old buildings that are still using old systems. And when you do that sort of math, it makes it pretty simple to figure out why you end up having 41% of all of the energy used in the United States consumed by buildings.
That's crazy, hey? Like,
I
think
it is, yeah.
it's like no one would ever say like, hey, buildings consume like roughly half of the energy produced in the US.
Exactly.
You would think it would be like, I don't know, like manufacturing plants or like hardcore, Ford, General Motors and these sorts of things. But these are like commercial properties, residential properties, even. I know we're talking about commercial properties here, but it's a crazy number to really, put into perspective.
It is, but if you think about it, what do you generally see when you look at the horizon? You see homes and buildings,
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So, Derek, in terms of the problem, we discussed previously before you went live that the Clean Energy Act has been passed by Congress, where they're putting like $600 billion into clean energy. What's the issue here? I mean, when you think about this, there's a lot of money to be putting into any sector. What do you feel like the impact is going to be, and where do you see some friction points in the distribution of this amount of money into the sector?
Well, I think we are going to find ourselves in a situation that is where there's going to be too much demand and not enough supply. I think is maybe the shortest way to say it. You're absolutely right to say it's a staggering amount of money to be put into an industry, and a lot of this cash is being invested into the built environment to upgrade utility substations and also just to incentivize and just make our buildings more efficient. But again, the problem that we have is that this data collection issue and quantifying the built environment is so antiquated. I mean, you're talking about some of the most highly trained, highly paid professionals in the industry walking around with pen and paper and a smartphone taking pictures of nameplates and or just other specs about the equipment, and it's completely inefficient. And when you add on top of that a labor shortage, because when you're talking about folks around my age, I'm 37. Like when we were young, we were all told like, oh, don't get a blue collar job, go to college, and now, probably unsurprisingly, there's all of a sudden a shortage of people to do this exact type of work.
Mm.
So we have two potential paths forward to make sure that this money is spent wisely and correctly and with you know rapidity, fast enough to get us to that we're really making a difference in a short amount of time. And that is either to lower the barrier to entry to doing these types of site surveys, or making those who already know how to do them more efficient. And what we've come up with at Mpac essentially does both of those things. It makes it easier for somebody that has less experience with equipment, with buildings, to do their jobs, and that opens up a new workforce. So we're working with United Nations and Renewable Nations Institute on a pilot program right now that is going to actually take school age kids and give them in a sense a paid internship to do this sort of site survey work using our tool. Of course, without it, they would be lost.
Mm.
So obviously, we're reducing that barrier to entry. But additionally, for the folks that do this for a living, it literally it's like 4 times faster than
Mm.
what they were doing before.
So, Derek, just to be clear for our audience here, so your audience is not the commercial building owner, it's the service providers to the building. So these are like engineering firms, mechanical rather, contractors who are looking to essentially evaluate the efficacy of buildings, right? So one of the key stats you shared with me was that 66% of all buildings have never been upgraded since the day where they were built, which is ridiculous. And that's despite 75% of them being over 20 years old. So these mechanical contractors, as an example, what you're saying is for everybody is that they go into these buildings and they use a manual process to evaluate the different hardware components, boilers, and things like that inside these buildings. Is that correct?
That is correct. Now, I don't want to misrepresent that there's no other solutions on the market, but pretty much all of them are one of two things, which is either they're using OCR, which is optical character recognition. So, you go up to a piece of equipment, you take a picture of the boilerplate, and it extracts the text. The other is what are called smart forms, which are essentially just kind of glorified Google Sheets. So the benefit that that gives you is you are able to type in the information at the site. But the negative is that there's still a lot of what we like to call it fat fingering, right? Like you can still make mistakes. And so both of those things do cut down on the time that these professionals take, but at the end of the day, there's still a really manual process involved because even with OCR, okay, great, I've got all this text. Now what goes where? There's no intelligence there. It's just here's everything that was on the nameplate. And then you have to go back to the office, say, okay, well, this was the manufacturer name, this is the model number, this is, and that takes a lot of time. So the bottom line is that before we brought our product to market, the other alternatives were saving maybe 20 to 30% of the time. And what we found is even with the MVP, which we released last year, we were finding a minimum of 50% time savings and up to 80. And that's over pen and paper, which despite these other alternatives being on the market, pen and paper is by far the most common incumbent when we speak to prospects.
Mm-hmm. So you've got this thing. I've got your website up for everybody called the Fast Sites Survey, rather. So, what exactly is the Fast Sites Survey like? And maybe if you could unpack a little bit more around like how do you actually solve this problem? I mean, one of the key things that I loved about your product was the fact that you're able to look up inventory of hardware. Like there's a massive data engine behind this. It's not just a survey tool.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what the tool does today is it allows you to walk up to a piece of equipment, um, take one picture of it, and you mentioned massive inventory. We've had folks use this for all different types of equipment. So, I would say our sweet spot, kind of our beachhead market, is and was uh, heating and cooling equipment along with lighting. But we've had people use it for everything from safety equipment, so like fire extinguishers and eye wash stations. And the bottom line is that we go pretty deep. And with that one picture, you're immediately digitizing the information about that piece of equipment. And what you're referring to is, well, actually, one other really kind of cool feature that I love is that on about 60% of the heating and cooling equipment, and we are uh, we are limited to that at least of right now. But about 60% of the heating and cooling equipment, we also are able to figure out the estimated remaining useful life just from that one photograph, which is really cool. So you can tell the building owner, hey, this boiler, it is 10 years past its useful life, just with one picture. It's incredible. And of course, at 60% now, we're going to keep getting better and better from there. And then furthermore, we're going to expand that to other pieces of equipment as well. But what you're referring to is called libraries, which is not only are you going to get the make, model, the efficiency, the SEER rating, or whatever insider lingo you want to use, but you're also going to get owners manuals, and you're going to get the specifics around the belts and filters that you need for replacements, or cooling or coolant, I should say. All that sort of information, all from one photograph. That's going to be released this quarter, uh, uh, which what we're calling Fast Site Survey 3.0 internally. But it will be out in short order, and that's something we're really excited about.
Where is this information usually? Is it on like in a safe somewhere? Like, should you know what I mean? Like, it's not a
If I
set of.
told you, Matt, I'd have to kill you. No. So I mean, how it's done in the how it's done in the real world today, it's so rudimentary. I mean, like, and I'm sure we'll probably get into this a little bit later, but my co-founder Herbert and I, we did this ourselves. This was our job, and what you did and what people still do is they just Google it, right? Like, okay, I've got the model number now. Let me type that into Google. Okay, here, and it's crazy that this still occurs. But how we've accrued it over, how we've been able to build what we've been able to build. I would simply tell you, Matt, that the company was started. We just actually had our 6-year birthday, about a month ago, And thank you. Yes, it feels like 60, but it's been 6. And we didn't sit around twiddling our thumbs for 6 years. So this is a long time coming, and it's great to see our vision come into life.
Hmm. So, so just to stick a little bit more around the industry here, like we all recognize like there's a lot of liquidity in the sustainability conversation, even let alone like investment going into startups doing amazing things. I've had, you know, startups doing using computer vision in landfills to track products from where they were manufactured and how they, like it's
Sure.
crazy what's going on in terms of like innovation and investment in the sustainability space. Um, in many cases, in my experience, is that there's a lot of lip service. This is like greenwashing. It's like,
Sure.
yeah, we're, energy compliant or we have zero emissions. And a lot of it, quite frankly, is bullshit. And so I'm curious to get your views here on like, what is the carrot, or is there a carrot, and or is there a stick that is driving the desired behavior change in this commercial building space from an energy compliance perspective?
Yeah, so there are both carrots and sticks employed by the folks, the powers that be, if you will. So the carrots have been around a long time, and generally speaking, that's things like utility incentives, maybe state incentives that really bring down the cost of a project. So it might be a situation. I mean, I can give you a perfect example of this, which was this is like an extreme example that there was a utility in New York State maybe 10 or 15 years ago when LEDs I believe it was LEDs. It might have been, well, we'll just say it's LEDs. It was a long time ago now. They they were willing to pay for the entire cost of the project, zero. You had to pay nothing. And they would give you upgraded lights, um, because when LEDs came out, they were so much more efficient than what was already there. And so that's an extreme version. A lot of times they might say, well, we'll pay for 20% of the project, or we'll pay for 30 or 50. And really, the idea is to incentivize building owners to say, okay, well, it's the best of both worlds. I get new stuff, whether it's new, lighting or windows or, boilers, air source heat pumps, and maybe I'm getting enough energy savings that it's actually even going to give me a return, right? So I can either pay for it myself, or I can take out a loan, or there's so many different financial products that exist around energy efficiency now. People have been very, very creative over the last 15 or 20 years, and essentially use the energy savings to pay for these upgrades. And when that occurs, that's a win-win. Um, but I guess back to your question about greenwashing, it that it is something that's considered to be a great thing for the industry, or I'm sorry, a great thing for industry, I should say, that it's a marketing ploy. But I think that a lot of the building owners that we deal with, I've always had this belief that if it's done right, which often it is not, that capitalism can be a force for good. And the reality is that a lot of these solutions, these energy solutions that have been innovated over the last 25 years, are they pay for themselves. And so, it's actually not only good for the planet, good for our environment and everything. It's actually a good investment too. So, that can be a really powerful value prop, especially when you do get that marketing boost as well.
Mm.
But as far as the stick, you mentioned, or I talked a little bit about the carrot. There are more sticks that are going to be utilized uh, in the market right now. In Ithaca, where the company is based and where I live, we were the first municipality to require buildings be electrified. So the point there is that buildings are being forced off of fossil fuels, and they're the way that they're going to force this through is that there's going to be fines, and of course much bigger and more internationally, significant is the fact that New York City has done the exact same thing. They've done their own sort of new Green New Deal, and so there's a couple of local laws, 87 and 97. 87 is requiring that these sort of energy audits that I mentioned a little while back, that if your building is larger than 50,000 square feet, that you have to basically be under constant audit. They want you to just always be measuring how much energy your building is using. And then local law 97 is truly the stick. So 97 says that there's going to be penalties of $268 per metric ton of greenhouse gas emissions above limits that they have set based on building type, building size. And the the bad news for building owners in New York is that it's actually that limit is going to be drastically lowered in the year 2030. So the limits are going to go into place in 2024. So for 5 years, they're going to be at a certain level. And then once we get to 2030, they're going to be drastically lowered. So just to give you an idea of what this could mean is decent sized buildings are probably, if they're, let's just say they're like we talked about, the 66% that have never done anything and they're old, they might be looking at maybe a four figure, maybe a mid to high four-figure fine, maybe 5 figures. But if they continue to do nothing in New York City, after 2030, the fines are essentially going to go up by 20 times,
Hmm.
um, which is just unbelievable. I mean, you want to talk about a stick. I mean, that's a stick. So you're going to have a situation where folks are going to be paying fines annually of high 5 figures, maybe 6 figures. I mean, and imagine skyscrapers. I mean, you could be talking half a million, three-quarters of $1 million a year if they're not in
Hmm.
compliance.
Hmm.
And so, then you need to do then, back to my capitalism point, if you're looking at it from a homo economicus standpoint, hmm, what's the better investment for me to upgrade my building and put in all new, more energy efficient stuff, and use the energy savings to defray the cost, or just keep sitting here and paying X fines for infinitum. And I think that's New York City's calculus, is that people are going to be forced into the decision that, like, look, if I have to pay 100,000 a year or whatever the case might be, and I have no idea when that's going to end, I might as well just pay the half a million now and get my $40,000 in energy savings and just call it a day.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a good point. I think people respond to different things, right? And I think, especially when it comes to greenwashing and being sustainable, it's like people always think it's like in 2050, then I'll get there. And so the carrot's not as motivating as the stick is, because if I was a commercial property owner and you came along to me and you went, like, here's the benefit, like you could actually like save energy and reinvest that into building upgrades. I'm less motivated by that proposition than I am by well, if you don't do this, you're going to get a 20x multiple as a penalty because you're not energy compliant. I think it's really interesting to see what people respond to, because people, like humans, are the same, man. Like, it's like there's greed, we're motivated by ego and things like that. And so if you come along and you say to me, hey, you're either going to drop 40K, becoming compliant, or you're going to lose 750K. If I'm a commercial property owner, for me, it's about profit. Like, that's what motivates me. I'm less motivated by vision. I'm less motivated by the idea of being sustainable. Like, I don't care if I go for like dinner at Tiffany's, or breakfast at Tiffany's, and then I go, yeah, my 10 buildings are compliant. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Sure.
I don't care about that. And that's like the universally true thing. And I think it is about driving the behavior in such a way that you get the outcome, you know. Um,
Absolutely. And having
yeah.
been in this industry as long as I have, um, carrots are only going to do so much. So I agree with you. I've seen it. I've seen it from the standpoint where you can put packages in front of building owners that, might save them. The way we always put it is, well, it's going to save you X amount in your expenses every year, even after debt service. And that is also going to increase your net operating income, your NOI, which also increases the value of your building, because that's how you evaluate the value of the building. And even when it's in black and white terms, you have to do nothing. Just this is going to pay for itself, and you're going to be richer. Your building's going to be better, and your building's going to be worth more money. I've got 14 other priorities that I need to worry about. I'm not going to worry about upgrading my heating and cooling equipment right now.
Exactly, because I care about occupancy. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, how, is my occupancy uplift going, in the right direction or not?
Yeah,
And
I
so,
mean, even when we make those arguments, Matt, it's like, but you can charge your tenants more because it's a better, it's a more comfortable space. You've got space, space heating or cooling or whatever the case might be, and it's really interesting how just there's a default to the to the way it's always been, that people really need to be motivated to make a change.
hmm yeah, because they're like, I got a friend of mine, Rich Mulholland. He's quite crass. He's Scottish. I love Scottish people. My grandfather was Scottish, so don't judge me. But he had a business called 21 Tanks, but he's now a professional speaker and he speaks all around the world. And so he talks to executives and he said, when this idea of change or innovation comes up, he said, I've realized after many years of trying to get companies to innovate is that people love to talk about change, but they don't actually want to change. They
Yeah,
want to talk about their ambitions to be sustainable, but they don't actually want to be sustainable. Why? Because change is hard. And he said, Rich is taking his words legit, but he was like, corporates want the quick the QDF, the quick dirty fuck. They want to believe that they can change, but then they
hmm,
don't want to change.
sure.
You know, it's very
Well, I mean,
interesting.
I think the inconvenience that I think goes through building owner minds when they're thinking about um, upgrading systems is, oh, now I'm going to have 6 months of people, walking around my building. Everything's going to be under construction. Everything's going to be in chaos, and that's what starts to go through their mind. It's just like, I don't want to deal with that. Let's just call it a day. Just leave it the way it is. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
coming at it from both sides, I think, is a smart way to go about it. And Ithaca, we're proud of Ithaca for being a pioneer there, but to have New York City basically doing the same thing is just crucial, because New York is, well, well, this is a built in New York series, right? So why don't say it? New York is the capital of the world, so having it happen there, I think, is a really important thing, and hopefully we'll see it bear out of the next. They'll see some real results, which I believe they will, over the next 5 years or so.
So, Derek, your software is being used by some really amazing companies. World's largest energy modeling software company, RAT. Screen is using your software. And I want to quickly talk to you about partnerships. So, for something like as a startup founder, but built in New York, trying to solve this problem that we've tabled for everybody. How important is partnerships for you? Obviously, you're not dealing with the end customer here, which is the building owner. You're actually dealing with this intermediary channel, HVAC installers, mechanical contractors, and things like that. So, I'm guessing that partnerships are important. Are they important? And what have you learned about the value of partnerships in helping scale a startup?
Oh, they're absolutely crucial. Definitely. I mean, when you're a startup, when we start, I always like to say, we were literally, this company's first meeting was literally in a garage, from one of our co-founders' garage, in a picnic table. Uh, so yeah, I mean, when you start out, it's like, who are you? Who the hell are you? And having those partnerships, it's so important. It's, to some extent, you use the term, borrowed credibility. That oh, this company wants to work with Mpac. Wow, okay, they must really be legit. So there's that side of it. Um, but there's so many things that you can't do on your own when you are such a small team. Obviously, we've grown through the years, but we're still a small team. And so partnerships, just they fill in so many blanks for you. And yeah, specifically around Red Screen. I mean, so Red Screen, that partnership, which we were able to 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 land this year. Red Screen is the largest energy modeling software in the world, like you mentioned. And what an energy modeling software does is, okay, think about all what I talked about going around, taking pictures, writing down serial numbers and specs. Well, what happens with it after that? Well, usually it's either going to go into a report or it goes into an energy model. So what is an energy model? You take all those pieces of equipment and all the different, you know, the condition of the building and all sorts of different stuff, and you put it into an energy modeling software, and that tells you, okay, this is how much energy you're using today, and if you did X, Y, and Z, this is how much energy you would be using then. And then you can use that to build a financial model and say, okay, so you're paying 13 cents a kilowatt hour today. You're going to be saving a million kilowatt hours a year. So you're going to be saving $130,000 a year on your electric bill. It basically goes like that. And so Red Screen is used by over 750,000 energy modelers worldwide. And the one thing that they saw in us with their part, the thing that we could bring to them, of course, there's plenty of things that they can bring to us, but what we could bring to them was that, especially on larger buildings, they were relying on assumptions around many different things with regard to equipment. And they didn't have what's called atomic level data, which is like, what's the efficiency on this machine on this floor? And they would just use assumptions for all of that. And so with Mpac's fast site survey, you can so easily gather that information and capture that information that now you can be way more accurate and way more precise in your assumptions, or rather about in your modeling around energy usage and energy savings. And that's so cool because now you can have so much more confidence in what you're presenting to building owners, because you're saying with X% more confidence that, yeah, you really are going to save this much, because we're going from you know 54% efficiency and the boiler that is there today to 96% with what we're going to put in,
Mm.
and that equals X number of you know, BTUs per year.
Mm-hmm. Derek, just to quickly talk about your journey here. So
Sure.
I think what you've done is really innovative and solves a real need. What stands out for you as a key insight or lesson that you've learned on your journey of building Mpac that other founders need to know about?
Well, I would say a couple of things. The first thing is, and this is not anything that's going to be novel, but I just feel like I have to say it, which is, you have to do something that you feel really passionate about. I mentioned that Herbert Dwyer and I, my co-founder, we both worked in this industry, and we know it inside and out. We know the process inside and out, and it was just always so silly to us that this was what was being done. And so solving this problem was it means something to us because we're helping people that were just like us. And then, around the larger industry side of it, I really wanted to do something in my career that I felt like I would be making a difference, and specifically around doing something in the battle against climate change. For folks that are watching this rather than listening, it might shock you to know, but I'm a card carrying member of the Mohawk Nation, and Haudenosaunee, also known as Iroquois Confederacy. And so when I was a kid, I grew up and spent a lot of time on the Six Nations Indian Reservation with my family. And through my grandfather Thomas Laclair and my great uncle Sil, who was the Sylvanus general, he was actually the general of the chief of the Cayuga Nation in Canada. They taught me about how important nature and the balance between nature and spirituality, and that really stuck with me. And I could not feel more proud to be building Mpac. And they're both gone now, Uncle Sil and my grandfather. But I feel like they would be, they would be cheering me and Mpac on because, we're trying to do what's right for Turtle Island, which is the way that Haudenosaunee think of the world, or as certainly in North America, and that's really awesome. And so if you can find that passion, that thing that it doesn't have to be your grandfather, but somebody instilled in you, and that's really something that's going to get you up every day, because it is a grind. Like I said, 6 years for us. I mean, there are a lot of bad days in those 6 years, more bad than good. So you got to have that. Um,
Isn't that
so
funny? Isn't that funny? Like that there's more bad days than good days. Do you know what I mean? Like think about that. Like
yeah,
there's more bad days in building a company than there are good days. Isn't that
there
weird?
are.
Like who chooses that? Like who chooses that as their life? Like
It takes it's a certain type of masochism, I think. But what's funny is I told sometimes when things are really tough, and there have been days where it's like, should we just give up? Should we, is this really going to work? Yada yada. And the conversation, I guess the one liner that I always say back to her when we're having these conversations is, if we didn't secretly love it, we wouldn't be doing it. I think it takes a certain type of person to do it. But yeah, you're
yeah,
right. I mean, there really are more bad days than good. There's just no way to sugarcoat that. But
I know, right? Well,
um,
speaking of bad days,
yeah,
so I'm gonna have a bit of fun with you. So I'm gonna give you the keys to the Map Round Show time machine, right? So you're gonna
okay.
get here's the keys. Off you go. Go back to day one, and cast your mind back to like all the bad days.
Mm-hmm.
Where you wanted to quit and so on and so forth, and even the good days. Um, what would you do differently about building this startup?
Well, um, I would have listened to my customers more closely earlier. We ultimately did go through the National I-Corps program, which is provided to high potential startups by the National Science Foundation. And we ultimately interviewed 125, I think, engineering and contracting firms, and obviously their employees. But we didn't get there until 2019, I want to say. It was a little ways in. And boy, I really wish we would have done that right at the beginning, because you have, and one of the other, if it was just pieces of advice I would give just a person in general, but certainly a startup founder, is you need to be open to being wrong about everything.
Mm.
Because you know a lot of us have like these really deeply held beliefs, and especially when you're an entrepreneur. I mean, what kind of a person becomes an entrepreneur? What kind of person has the ego to think that they can build a market out of nothing and build a product out of nothing? I mean, it's insane. So like when you tell that person, oh no, actually, you need to think about, like, you might be wrong, you might be right overall, but there are a lot of things you're wrong about. Like sometimes you kind of get your back up a little bit. And that's why I think customer discovery in that process was so valuable. Was it taught us all the things that we were wrong about, or all the assumptions that maybe were self-fulfilling, or whatever the case might be. So
Mm.
that would be my piece of advice. Figure out
Yeah,
what your customer wants, and make sure you talk to a whole hell of a lot of
mm. Yeah, I would have saved millions if I'd taken your advice. Like back in the day,
them.
like I've literally spent millions on products that didn't actually go to market.
It's a
Millions.
number, what is it? It's either the number one or number two reason. I think it's number one. The number one reason why startups fail is, you know, to put it kindly, no market need. I remember seeing that, and that's just, I built something no one wants to buy.
Yeah, well, you got to find a problem that your customers have, and it's I've told you before, but I mean, I've started 14 startups over the last 25 years. Had a couple of exits. Most of those died, um, and it's interesting for me to observe that like when I thought I would be going out to solve this problem, like let's just say it's problem A, I wound up solving problem F, because
Mm-hmm.
of this process
Mm-hmm.
of listening to the customer. Like I wound up thinking my customer would be, like this type of business, and then it wound up to be a completely different business.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose to your point, around being open to like what you don't know. You have to like, you know, stop believing in your own bullshit, because it's nice to say that you want to solve this problem, but actually like the world doesn't need it right now, you know, or maybe the timing's not right, or maybe they're not prepared to pay for it. So, you know, if you're open to like, even you know this, right? Like I've been talking to founders also being open to like, okay, well, where's the gap here and how can I add the most value? Same thing. You know, you can't just think it's X, because it's probably 9 times out of 10 not X. So if you're not open to it and you just commit to X, like you're probably going to die. Like your business will
Sure.
die.
Yes. That's absolutely right. And like I said, there's a certain type of person that becomes an entrepreneur on the disc scale. They're usually in the D, maybe sometimes in the I. So they have a most entrepreneurs have a domineering personality, and that comes with hard headedness. And so I think for entrepreneurs especially, it's so important to remember that you are absolutely wrong. When you start your business, there's like a 99% chance that you're probably going about it the wrong way. The only way you're going to see your own blind spot is by listening to others. And when I say others, I'm mostly talking about your customers,
Yeah.
because you're solving a problem. That's the key. You're not building, like, I like to think about it from this perspective. You're not building a company, you're not building a product, you're solving a problem. That's
Mm,
really what we're here to do. And like Herb and I mean, we saw a problem in real life that we dealt with, and we said we need to solve it. And that's, sometimes it's so easy to get, all excited about, oh boy, what if the project, could make milk, or the product could make milkshakes, or like, what if it could do this? Wow, wouldn't it be great if it did that? Does the customer want that? Because if not, as cool as it is, it's a waste of time and money.
mm,
So
hmm.
remember, it's always about the problem.
Yeah, and you got to build your business around that problem. That's the only way you scale. Because actually, you know, like if you think about a problem, like it's different in terms of its acuteness depending on who you're talking to. You know, so you could have the same use case problem exist in many companies or many industries. Like take AI,
Mm-hmm.
many applications of AI, pretty much any like industry or company. But within that, there is an opportunity to find like who's suffering the most with this problem or with this use case.
Yep. Yep, your beachhead market, and I think it's in Crossing the Chasm, which of course pretty much everybody listening to this will have either known of or read. If not, do it immediately. Um, there it is, where he and I, being a bit of a history nerd, he uses the analogy: you need to take Normandy before you can start thinking about taking Paris.
Mm,
And it's that's so true. You have to have your beachhead market before you can start thinking about, like, oh, look at all these other things I can do. You need
mm,
to solve one problem for one subsegment,
mm.
and before you can do that, you can have all the grandiose visions as you want, but your business isn't going to go anywhere.
Yeah. My grandfather, who was Scottish, was actually on the beach on D-Day.
Really?
Hmm.
Wow.
So yeah, so I
God
mean,
bless them.
it's true, right? It is
Yes.
absolutely true. But Derek, let's wrap this up. Like, why do you do what you do? Like, what gets you out of bed in the morning?
Well, I mean, I think I gave a little bit of insight into that, with regard to my family history, and wanting to do them proud. Um, and I think really that's what it is. My dad he was a production worker at a Goodyear plant. So he was sort of one of the last of the dying breed of the uh, what do you call, like, the union plant, power not power plant, but like, factory workers, in Buffalo, where I grew up. And but he was always really handy, right? He always loved building things. My he As a gift for my soon to be born son, he built a huge cabinet for him, and he asked me one time kind of the same question, like, well, what's so interesting about what you do? And what I said to him was, well, I said, how you love building, well, cabinets, or you love building Adirondack chairs. Like, I get that same satisfaction out of building this company. Like, this is it really makes me feel like so accomplished to have these challenges and to try to overcome them one by one. And I mean, I think back to the one job I had after business school that was not this. Boy, I hated it. And I made so much more money than I make today. and I had so much more vacation than I have today, but it was just not fulfilling. And to have that ability to have the know that you're getting up and you're doing something that's never been done before, and you're building something that you can be proud of. That's what gets me out of bed every day.
Amazing. Derek, great to have you on the show, buddy. And, I'm super excited to see where you guys are going. I know you guys are growing aggressively, so that's great feedback. But more importantly, like it's great to get your story, out into the world. And I'm sure a lot of founders have benefited from this. So thank you.
Thank you, Matt. It's been a pleasure.
Alrighty, guys. Thanks so much. Ciao, ciao.